Today we're going to describe what EngineStat is, how it can safeguard your classic car's engine, and then we're going to do an actual installation in a 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. So what is EngineStat? EngineStat was invented this last year by our company to help owners of classic cars protect their engines. We had a classic car, we were driving it one day, everything was great, and unbeknownst to us, a little tiny incandescent bulb burned out. This bulb is the oil pressure indicator. So before we knew it, we were driving the car with almost no oil in it. Engine seized up. No indication whatsoever. No warning, no smoke, no noise, no overheating. Engine just seized up. This can happen when your engine oil levels are low. If you're not checking that engine oil level all the time, or if there's a sudden loss in oil and you have a faulty detection system, you will have problems with your car. Now, classic cars, especially cars built in the 60s and early 70s, had very, very poor indicator systems. Basically, just a light bulb and a wire to a pressure sensor. If that wire falls off, if that light bulb burns out, you have no indication that your car. The temperature sensors are inaccurate. The engine vacuum sensors are non-existent in those cars. The coolant temperature may or may not work for your car. So what we've done is develop EngineStat, which is a clip-on electronic engine status monitoring system. As soon as something goes wrong with your engine, you get an alert on your phone. Even if your phone is black, even if your phone is doing something else, you'll get a sound and a tone saying the car you're driving has got a problem. So inside the kit, very simple. Simple EngineStat module. The EngineStat module is installed in your engine bay. Wiring is provided. Temperature monitoring is provided. You simply hook it up and download and install the app from the Play Store, and your engine is safeguarded. You do not want to drive a classic car without EngineStat. The risk of you fouling up your engine is too great. Now, EngineStat is designed for cars with so-called idiot lights or with gauges. We have kits to adapt for gauges. Do not trust your gauges. Do not trust those idiot lights. This is a 1967 Cadillac Eldorado barn find. Pretty good shape for a car that's been sitting under a carport for 10 or 15 years. The engine is running, we have the engine running, but we're not going to drive this car until we have EngineStat installed. The risk of burning up an engine is just too much, especially a classic car like this with an invaluable, irreplaceable engine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open the hood up, we're going to show you how easy it is to install EngineStat, and then we're going to show the features. We're going to show how EngineStat can detect if a lamp is burned out. We can show how EngineStat will detect if the lead wiring is bad. We can show how EngineStat will show your engine RPM, your engine vacuum, your coolant temperature, and your overall battery health. So, let's open the hood and install this. First thing to do when installing EngineStat is to disconnect the negative cable on the battery. Always disconnect the negative cable first. Once you do that, it's safe to install EngineStat. Do not install EngineStat with the battery connected. If you do so, you'll avoid the warranty. Because if you make a mistake during wiring, you might short something out. You don't want to do that. Next thing we're going to do is sort of decide where we want to place the EngineStat. The EngineStat is connected with a vacuum line to your distributor vacuum advance tube with a black wire for ground, a red wire which will go to the coil plus, a yellow wire which will go to the coil negative, a white wire which will go to your oil pressure switch on the engine block, a blue wire which will go to the oil pressure harness, a brown wire which will monitor the battery voltage, and this harness here will be our temperature sensor which will plug in here. So generally, the best place to mount an EngineStat, especially if you want to hide it so that the car looks all original, is back near the brake booster, near the firewall. Any place along there. You do not want it near a very high heat source, for instance a header or something like that. The firewall is often the best place. Now, to just give you an overview, very simple to install. We're going to splice in a vacuum line to the vacuum advance hose right there on the distributor. We'll cut that and splice that in. We're going to connect, of course, a ground. The ground can be any convenient chassis ground. The kit will come with wire for all these connections with substantial amounts of wire, with a temperature probe connector and probe, and with end connectors. So you can trim these wires to exactly the length that you want, so you can make a neat installation. We decided to install our EngineStat right against the firewall, sort of in the center. You can see there that we've mounted it against the heater box. It's a good place. It's easier for us to reach the distributor vacuum line, and we'll have plenty of wire to reach the other sensors. Now, the first component we're going to install with the EngineStat is the coolant temperature sensor. Now, this sensor fits between the fins of the radiator, and you want to place it as close as you can to the radiator outlet, which is this hose right here, the top hose, as possible. And make sure, of course, it's not going to be in the way of the fan. In this case, we will just simply insert it into the fins and push it in. Now, before we push it in, we will make sure and use plenty of the provided thermal grease. The better their thermal conductivity is between this piece and the fins of the radiator, the more likely it is you'll get an accurate temperature measurement. Now, the important thing is not the absolute temperature measurement in this case, but the changes that you might see. If you see a sudden rise or fall in temperature, or something uncharacteristic for your particular car, then you should be worried. So what we'll do now is we'll just wedge that in there straight between the fins. We could install it this way if we wanted to. You can see how it'll go between the fins here. Or we could install it from the other side. We're going to install it on this car from the other side because it'll be more hidden, more original looking. Okay, we've installed our temperature sensor. You see we've just pushed it into the fins. Make careful not to destroy any part of the radiator while we do that, but it fits nicely with the fins, and lots of the thermal grease will give us good thermal conductivity. We've routed the wire along the original wiring loom so we can see how it can fit right into the car without being very noticeable. Alright, all we have to do now is plug in the thermal sensor connector, which goes on like this. That's that. Now all we have to do is hook up the tachometer connection, the battery connection, the oil pressure monitoring connections, and we'll do that now. We've connected our yellow and red wires. These wires go to the coil positive and coil minus. Red, coil positive. Yellow, coil minus. We're also going to hook up our vacuum line. We routed these in a nice, clean, efficient manner. First thing we're going to do is connect our distributor vacuum hose. So we simply cut the distributor vacuum hose at a point that makes sense for us for this particular car, and we just insert it here like this. Very simple. Now we're going to connect the coil plus, which would be the red wire. The terminals that we provide in the kit are shrink wrap terminals to keep moisture out. So once you crimp it on here, you can heat this up with a heat gun or a hair dryer, and it'll shrink over the wire there, giving a good airtight seal. Probably just being in the engine will actually seal it over some time. So we've loosened these wires, and the coils in your car will be clearly marked with a plus or a minus. So sometimes it's a good idea to look closely at the coil to make absolutely sure you get these in the right place, because if you don't, the system won't work and the warranty is void. So the top of the coil will be mounted usually with a raised embossed sort of symbol for plus and a raised embossed symbol for minus. So the red goes on the plus and the yellow will go on the minus. Now we're going to connect the black ground wire and the brown battery monitor wire. So we just route it through our harness just like the other wires, and we're going to connect them over here with the ring terminals provided. Now we decided to put the black wire right on the battery terminal bolt, the brown wire on the battery terminal voltage bolt, just like that. The ring terminals come in the kit. You can connect this black wire to any chassis ground that you think is reliable. The brown wire needs to go to somewhere where there's battery voltage. Alright, next, all we have to do now is to connect the oil pressure sensor wire, which is the white wire, and the oil pressure harness wire, which is the blue wire, and we're ready to turn this thing on. Now we're going to connect our blue oil harness wire and our white oil sensor wire. So we've plugged them into the EngineStat module. Now you'll want to put the male connector on the oil harness. Now right here is the oil pressure switch for this car. Most of the oil pressure switches in classic cars will look very similar to this. It'll have a single spade plug-in connector like that. Please don't confuse your oil pressure switch with your temperature monitoring system. What you want is the oil pressure switch. Consult your manual if you have any confusion, but normally the oil pressure switches have a single terminal coming off the top. Here's our oil pressure harness. We simply take the blue wire with the male connector provided and plug it right in like that. If there's any exposed metal, be sure and put electrical tape around that to make sure it doesn't short somewhere. Over here, using the female connector on the white wire, we connect straight back on to the oil pressure switch. There we go. Now, of course, we'll dress these wires up and put them neatly away off the video here, but at this point, the system is ready to test. Okay, so we've checked our wiring, made sure that all the colors are correct, all the connections are correct. We've connected the battery back, and now we've turned on our ignition switch. We haven't started the car. There's no real need to at this point. We can see that the EngineStat is working. It's transmitting. It's telling us that the oil pressure switch is okay. And you can see the red indicator light on the car, which is now driven by the EngineStat monitor, is lit up. This is the normal operation. When your car is not started but the ignition is on, the oil indicator light should go on. In a minute we'll show you what it looks like on the EngineStat when this lamp is burned out or the wiring is disconnected. You can see our temperature. Well, since we haven't run the car, it's about ambient temperature, which is about 77 degrees outside. Our battery voltage, 12.4 volts. Our wiring indicator says the lamp okay. That means the wiring and the indicator lamp are okay. Of course, the engine is off, so the RPM is 0, and of course the vacuum is virtually 0. All right, so now we're ready to start the car. Everything appears to be working, and we'll crank it up and show you on the other side. We have the engine running. You can see that our RPM is quite high, about 1,000 RPM. We need to adjust that down. The vacuum isn't very good. The car has a lot of vacuum leaks, only around 8 inches mercury. We've got to fix that. So this is helping us. Our battery voltage is high, meaning the alternator is not working properly. So this car, this barn find, even though it's running, I can see already I have several things to fix. But I know for sure my oil pressure is okay. My engine's not going to be ruined, and that's why we always install EngineStat on our classic cars. If I rev the engine a little bit, you notice that, of course, our muffler has a hole in it. It's quite loud, but you can see the RPMs changing and the vacuum going up a little bit. All the indicators are working. Fix this vacuum leak, fix my alternator, and this car will be good to drive as soon as I get the muffler fixed. All right, that's all there is to EngineStat except for one more feature. This up here is the name of the car. I can name this anything I want. So I'm going to name this Cadillac. If I have multiple cars, I can have the same engine monitor on my app. In other words, I don't have to download a new app for every car. This one app will service as many cars as I have EngineStats installed. And now my app remembers that this car, when it's on and I'm inside of it, it's called Cadillac. So now that we have EngineStat installed, we're going to simulate some problems so you can see what they're like. Let's say that you suddenly have a disconnected lamp. Well, we'll show you what that looks like. By disconnecting the lamp, the system will check about every 30 to 50 seconds to see if the lamp is okay or not. And then it will test the lamp and indicate. Now I've disconnected the lamp under the engine, in the engine compartment, and you can see that right there it's flashing telling me the lamp is out. Now our oil pressure is still good on this car, but our lamp is out. So we've either got to fix that or just realize that it's a good thing we had EngineStat, or else we wouldn't know that we had a potential problem. Now let's say that there is an oil sensor problem while we're driving the car. Right now the engine is running about 1100 RPM, and let's say that there's suddenly a loss of oil pressure. Well, this is what will happen. You hear a loud tone and you see the word alert. Now the phone, you can't really see it, but it's vibrating as well. Even if this phone is doing something else, I'm going to disconnect the alert and I'm going to switch to some other application. Let's say that we're over here doing something else. And then we're driving along. Maybe we even have our phone turned off. Not off, but in the black mode, okay? And suddenly there's an engine problem. We hear the tone, we feel the vibration, and then we go look and see what's wrong, and then the app is back on top, ready for us to look at and see what's going on. So even under the circumstances of closing the app, let's do this. We'll close the app. We'll put the phone in black mode. It's asleep. Let's say we're driving along and something happens to the pressure sensor breaks, or the wire comes off, or the incandescent, or the oil pressure suddenly drops. Then we hear the tone. We feel the vibration. Can't feel it, of course, but it is making a tone. If we turn our phone back up, we see that we're getting the alert. So under any circumstance, even if the app is closed, even if you're doing something else, you'll see the indication of the alert. All right. Of course, you'll always be able to monitor the temperature. You'll be able to monitor the battery voltage. You can see here, if I rev the engine a little bit, I might see different battery voltages. If I rev the engine there, you can watch the engine RPM go up or down. And of course, EngineStat will measure engine vacuum, which at this point we don't actually have hooked up at the moment, just for the demonstration purposes. If you have more than one car, you'll see a list of the cars here. Right now we just have one car, but let's say you have two classic cars, you'll see a list. And when you get into the car, it will automatically select the car that's energized, that's running, and you'll be able to get your data there. Remember, EngineStat won't let you down. Even if the phone is completely black and it's in a mode where it's asleep, it'll still alert you. Make that alert sound and that vibration, so that when you pick up your phone, you'll be able to see it and know exactly what's going on.